he was recording field recordings with an old dictaphone, hoping to use them on the next Mars Volta record. Omar later actually discovered that all his recordings after he entered the antique shop were corrupted and sounded more like white noise, soaked, curdled screams than the thick and tranquil air of the shop's interior.
You are listening to Tape Spaghetti, a podcast about the twisted and tangled innards of the music industry. Some of this content may not be for all listeners or viewers, so if it's not for you, no harm, no foul. We'll just catch you on the next one. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. Here we go.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tape Spaghetti. I am Scott Marquardt, joined, as always, by Blake Weiland. But wait, there's more. We have our first ever guest on Tape Spaghetti, the lovely, the English, Joe Branton. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing great. The lovely and the English. That's, I'll take that. That's good. I'm great. I am so very happy to be a guest on this wonderful podcast. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course.
We're so happy to have you.
Yeah. The lovely and the English sounds like one of those 2000s and 2010 stomp and clap bands.
Stomp and clap bands. That was bow tie, sleeve tattoos, and beards, wasn't it?
Suspenders.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
You had the head and the heart. There was a lot of the blank and the blank.
The blank and the blank, and a lot of hey. Oh,
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, all restaurants that opened at that same time kind of followed that same template, but there was no like they. It was like or the. Let's
it would just be like
it was like
and
bone and table. Yeah.
Got it. Amazing.
At least in the States, and it's still alive and well here in Portland. So
really, wow, you still get that sort of music. That kind of died out here. We only really got the one band.
The restaurants, not so much the music.
The restaurants, they're still going. Oh,
yeah, and the outfits, those are still things. But the music, it's all over the place.
Probably still play in the restaurants, though, right?
Oh, for sure. You're definitely going to hear Mumford and Sons if you go into Bone and Broth.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Bone and Broth. Great.
Yes. But we're here to talk about a band today, though, right?
That's the idea.
Yeah. Well, before we do that, I want to get into you, because while you've been on the Tone Mob a lot, I've been on Guitar Nerds a lot. You've never been on this show, and we do have, despite what people may think, people who don't listen to those shows listen to this one. So, Joe, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I host, hi, dear listener, I host the Guitar Nerds podcast. We've been running around the same time as the Tone Mob, but of course we're UK based. Actually, like 50% of our audience is in the US. So there. But yes, I run Guitar Nerds. We're a weekly podcast all about guitar nerdery, a very similar vibe to the Tone Mob. We're talking about gear and largely, gets driven by my co-host Matt Knight's love for Boss pedals, so we go there a lot. But it's that sort of thing. It's exactly the kind of extreme gear nerdery that you'd expect from a podcast called Guitar Nerds. So yeah, so I do that. And when Blake asked me to come on this podcast, I did have a freak out for a little while. There was a whole thread of messages to Blake where I was like, I don't know how to do a topic that's not super geeky. I kept being like, are you sure I can't make it about the gear that a band used at a particular time? But I don't know why I didn't just think of this tale first, because it is the ultimate, you dear listener, are going to get to hear the ultimate rock and roll occult story this week. That's what I'm promising.
Yeah.
Boy, am I excited.
And just for the listeners, I also want to go on record and saying I think that Joe might be, maybe, the world's #1 fan of this band.
I actually think that is possible. Mm-hmm. Can I say who the band is yet? Do you want me to hold that off for a bit?
No, go for it.
Oh, no, okay. They know. It's in the title. We're the only ones that...
of course, it's in the title. I always forget that. Whenever I'm doing a podcast and I'm like trying to sort of, I'm going to hold off saying this and create some suspense. But of course, everyone's read the title at the start of the episode. So of course, dear listener, I'm talking about the Mars Volta. Do you know, Spotify Wrapped on the last 2 Spotify Wraps have been pretty on point. But the the last one, I was in the top 0.03% of listeners to the Omar Rodriguez Lopez trio, which are one of his many bands. And I mentioned this on the podcast, and a listener worked out based on how many monthly listeners they have, and it puts me in the top 47 people in the world that listen to.
God. Could you imagine meeting the other 46? Get you all together at a banquet hall somewhere?
Yeah, they're just my shadow accounts, but yes, but yeah, I was in like top 0.03% of those. Then like the Mars Volta was second. Third was Omar Rodriguez Lopez solo. You know, I think fourth was Bosnian Rainbows. So I have a lot invested in the music that Omar Rodriguez Lopez makes.
So I just picture the meme of Spider-Man all pointing at each other, but it's Joe standing in a room just pointing at other Joes.
Yeah, in different sort of niche limited edition Omar Rodriguez Lopez t-shirts.
Yes, I love it. Yes. Yeah. I actually love it when somebody is a super fan of something, because I'm a super fan of a few bands like that. But it's at some point, some people, like, I feel maybe they're a little embarrassed about how much they really love something. And I like it when people just wear it on their sleeve. You know, this is my thing. This is what I'm into. And I don't care what anybody thinks.
I agree. I think that everybody out there in the world like knows one thing better than anybody else. I like to think that everyone's the world's expert on something, no matter how nichey it is. And it's always fun to find that thing and be like, why don't you just tell me about that for the next however long it takes, basically.
Do you think it's like an age thing as well? I feel like the older I've got, the more comfortable I've become with being incredibly nerdy about a few select things. It's sort of when you're younger, you're oh, no, I want to be cool. But now I'm older, I'm like, no. You know, last year, I spent like £120 plus about that in shipping on a limited edition Barclay from Star Trek The Next Generation action figure still in its box, you know?
Whoa. I thought you meant Charles Barkley.
Oh, yeah, no.
Which would be equally awesome. That would align more to me, but...
Yeah. No. But, unfortunately, just Star Trek is the other thing.
I was going to say, maybe it just has to do with getting older and just not, you know what, I don't care what people think anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't care. I'm going to like what I like.
Yeah. We'll all be yelling at clouds before soon.
Oh, I do it every day. Every single day. I'm a father. It's my job. So let's get into it. What is this Mars Volta tale that is going to be woven on this podcast? What are we talking about today, Joe?
Okay, so I guess I'll just do like a little snippet overview, and we'll go into the depths of it. What I'm talking about when I mention the Mars Volta and the occult, I'm talking about a cursed record that the Mars Volta produced. It was their greatest record. It's called the Bedlam in Goliath, and the band themselves were cursed during the recording of this record, and they, in order to produce this record, had to rid themselves of the curse, and even had to put some things on the records to undo that curse. I'm trying to keep it very vague so I can go into the details, but it's the amount of stuff I'm going to tell you is wild. The stuff that they went through is wild during this record, and it was quite documented at the time, but sort of only in niche corners of music. So that's what we're talking about, a real world haunting of.
That's amazing.
I love this. This is my favorite Mars Volta record as well.
Is it?
I'm not as big into it as you are. I'm much more of a casual fan, but this is my favorite Mars Volta record. So yeah.
So I get to play the fool here, because I was a big At the Drive-In fan, and then I remember Delouse in the Comatorium and Francis the Mute, and then kind of fell off after that. Not with any prejudice towards the band or anything. I just haven't dove in as deep. So I'm excited.
A lot of people did. I think Deloused in the Comatorium was a fantastic album. It was also relatively accessible. It was certainly very accessible for the Mars Volta and what they would later become. And it did very well at finishing off where At the Drive-In had left off. It was kind of a nice way to people go, hey, here's this post-punk band. They're now a prog band. But it kept it pretty safe. Whereas,
it feels like it sits between their catalogs, kind
exactly.
of. It's like a half at the drive-in sort of thing.
Exactly.
Which like kind of happens too with like the first Audio Slave record, where you're like, these were all written to be Rage Against the Machine songs. They just didn't really work. And so it's kind of a ragey record. And then it went a little bit of a different way after that.
Exactly the same thing. Yeah, it's absolutely that. But yeah, the Francis the Mute was fantastic, and for the first time, Francis the Mute was them trying to push the boundaries a lot. They included a lot more field recordings, a lot more proggy gaps, a lot more extended things, which tend to be what lost people who liked At the Drive-In. And then after that, from that point onwards, they were fully prog. So you got the Bedlam and Goliath, you got Octahedron, and you got Nocturnica. Of course, in between these albums, they were actually releasing other albums not under the name Mars Volta. There's not Chronesthesia, Cryptonesia, which I think was supposed to be the album before Octahedron, but they ended up releasing that as the Omar Rodriguez Lopez group. So there are many more albums than the ones just released as the Mars Volta, with the Mars Volta lineup on them. I mean, you think with like 2018, 2019, Omar released 13 albums in 1 year. There was something like 52.
Bananas.
Yeah, there are something like 52 records attributed to the lineup that make up the Mars Volta as well. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
Wow. That is a busy man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's almost like it presents like a band that can't really edit and like cut stuff down, but in lieu of like editing down, the kind of like choosing which band it's going to fall under like functions like a form of editing, where you have this like cleaner Mars Volta timeline versus all the rest of it. It's all out there,
Definitely,
just not
definitely.
part of the same thing.
Well, it's what the drummer on the record we're going to be talking about today, the Bedlam and Goliath, was Thomas Pridgeon, and he left the band because of the Cryptonesia album being released as a self-titled Omar record instead of the Mars Volta album. He was very unhappy that Octahedron ended up being the Volta record that got released, because it's largely an acoustic album. He didn't get to show off his chops nearly as much. So, but when it comes to drummers, the Mars Volta have been through them all. There is something like the last two albums that have come out since they've been back together have something like 3 drummers across them, plus different drummers for live. So, it's Omar's very good at upsetting people, and for some reason, drummers seem to be the ones that get the most upset.
What? What? No way. Maybe, but if you listen to the music, he does ask a lot out of his drummers. He wants them to do some pretty wild stuff.
And that's very true, especially live, because so much of it's based on like it's improvisational. They'll want to extend and sort of tighten areas in different places. It's really interesting. When I've interviewed my favorite bass player in the world is the bass player who spent the most time in the Mars Volta, which is Juan Alderete. And when I got to chat with Juan Alderete in one time when I was talking to him in Germany at like a Warwick event, sort of for all their gear, he was talking about how he had actually the best time on Nocturnica, which is one of their least popular albums, when they had D'Anthony Parks on drums, and those two worked a lot together in other records that didn't come out as the Mars Volta. But you watch some of the live performances, and D'Anthony Parks will go off on crazy fills whilst one is having to hold down the fundamentals. And at that time, he's playing an old 62 jazz bass with nylon tape rounds. Oh, sorry, I'm doing I'm going too far.
That's okay. That's okay. You're all right. Yeah, that's acceptable. Yeah.
Okay, but he's like holding down these like Motown inspired like soul bass lines, whilst D'Anthony Parks is going off in these incredible round the kit, very long fills, and you can just see in the videos one having to really focus because he's the only thing in the band keeping it together. And there was an awful lot of that around that time, where it is actually because there's such crazy musicianship going on elsewhere, it often felt to Juan Alderete to keep the band together and on point. It's really impressive. If you watch their live videos, you can really see the cogs turning, where he's just trying to shut out everything happening around him and just focus on keeping it tight.
And this is a jazz thing too. Like in jazz, traditionally, the bassist is who keeps time. The drummer is not necessarily the timekeeper. They do some of that too. Like they'll keep the form, in a lot of ways, but like because you want your drummer to be able to play all around it, so you need somebody to lock it down, and that becomes the bass.
Yeah, exactly.
And Juan, that's not his first like difficult gig either. He
thinks starting in Racer X, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Starting in Racer X, which if nobody's listening to it, doesn't sound anything like the Mars Volta, but extremely technical, extremely difficult. And that's where I think he launched off from. And that was, a very intense way to launch into a music career. Then Juan just never decided, I don't want to do anything easy for the rest of my career. I'm just going to do everything that's as hard as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's brilliant.
Yeah, a lot of these people, it feels like they must have gone to like, MIT's like music program or something. They're like, we are diving deep into the most technical side of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're a musical astrophysicist.
I feel like, these guys were, but like crazy musical astrophysicists who were, constantly on drugs and, not very coherent. But it made the most amazing music I've ever heard in my life. Certainly for that period of time, from Deloused, which I do love, but from the point in time from Francis the Mute through to Nocturnica, I feel like that was a real golden period of creative prog from Omar Rodriguez Lopez and friends.
Yes. So they're getting ready to record this haunted record.
Yeah.
But how did the record get haunted?
I was going to say, did they know it's haunted before they record it? We'll let you tell the tale.
So I've done enough preamble now. I'm ready to launch into the facts. Yeah,
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Hit us.
All right. Okay. Well, so I'll read off a little bit that I wrote just to get you in the mood, and then we'll sort of, we'll take from there. Okay. So in 2006, inspired by the old faiths, Omar took a trip to Jerusalem, where strolling through the Muslim quarter, he came across an old, rundown antique shop. At the time, he was recording field recordings with an old dictaphone, hoping to use them on the next Mars Volta record. Omar later actually discovered that all his recordings after he entered the antique shop were corrupted and sounded more like white noise, soaked, curdled screams than the thick and tranquil air of the shop's interior. Now, when he was inside the shop, he happened across this old, heavily scratched with sort of human scratch marks, heavily scratched and chipped Ouija board. He bought it from the shop as a gift for the vocalist and the other sort of core member of the Mars Volta, Cedric Bixler-Zavala. And he gave it to Cedric upon his return ahead of the Mars Volta's tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers later that year. So that's that's where we're starting off.
Wow.
Omar's gone to Jerusalem. He's gone into an antique shop that already something was off with his dictaphone recordings. It sounded very weird. And he has bought a proper, you can buy Ouija boards from eBay, like new ones. This is old. This is wrecked. This is covered in like fingernail scratched marks. And he buys this from an antique shop and takes it back to the States, and he gives it to Cedric Bixler.
Why would you buy the Ouija board?
Well, I mean, it's they're pretty crazy guys. I don't know, because they were heroin addicts just before this record. I think they just about kicked the habit then, but there could have been some overlap as well. They're pretty crazy guys at this point in their career. So that's kind of where they are. So Cedric brought the board on tour, and the band started playing with it occasionally after shows. But as they started messing around with it and seeing what happened with the Ouija board, they found that they were starting to play with it with increased fervor until it became a ritual. So after every performance, the band would have to go back to the bus, and even the band members that were less enthusiastic about doing this felt that they were compelled to join these little band bus séances.
Well, I guess once you get that really cool old, Jerusalem Ouija board and start playing with that, nobody really wants to sit around and play light as a feather, stiff as a board anymore, like they had been doing on their sleepovers.
Exactly.
What do you
Anybody
keep
want to play
asking?
Clue?
Yeah, exactly. What do you keep asking the Ouija board after that? Because I feel like you're like, all right, who's Cedric gonna marry, and who's I feel like you'd run out of questions.
Yeah, maybe.
But if you're compelled, for some reason,
they were feeling compelled, and there's quite a few of them doing this. You've got Omar Rodriguez Lopez, Cedric Bixler Zavala. You've got Ike Owens on keys, Juan Alderete. Thomas Pridgeon isn't in the band at this point. Blake Fleming is the drummer at this point. You would have also probably had Marcel Rodriguez Lopez, who's often their additional keyboard player. And I don't know if they took Adrian Terezes Gonzalez on the tour. He often does their flute and saxophone. Sometimes he's on tours with them, sometimes he's not. And John Frusciante often played with them live as well. So possibly also involved in these seances. But that's the group. So it's a sizable group of people playing.
Question for the group that maybe knows more about Ouija than I do. Is a Ouija board session inherently a seance? Is that the idea? Is that it's the spirits of elders and whatnot that are moving it around?
That's right. Yeah. So there are a couple of things. So Omar named the Ouija board the Soothsayer. And he said that name sort of came to him. So the board itself is called the Soothsayer. And yes, very much on a Ouija board, you would have in this case, the Soothsayer would summon up a spirit or a conduit that would then represent other people potentially, and would talk to them through the alphabet thing and the little Ouija board bit. But
I didn't realize that in the Hasbro. In the Hasbro version, I thought you just asked it and not unspecified spirits moving around, but they would be
approach
one
it
person
however
in
you
mind.
want. So people will. This is the other thing, and why they're so controversial and kind of weird. You might say, "Oh, I want to talk to Grandpa," and try to talk to Grandpa, and something might talk to you that claims it's Grandpa, and it's not Grandpa. It's something else.
Of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's no vetting process for who or what's talking to you. Now, on the after a few tries, the Mars Volta found that they were conjuring up a singular voice that was representing three individual spirits: a man, a mother, and a daughter, who all knew each other and were trapped in a love triangle. And their story ends with an honor killing of one of them. And this singular entity that spoke and represented all three and could speak from any of those three perspectives named themselves Goliath, which is kind of the title of the record, the Bedlam in Goliath, because depending on who was talking, you would get very, very different tempers, very different voices from the Soothsayer. So with this man, the mother, and the daughter, each time Goliath spoke, it would recite a poem that told the story of their fate. But depending on which of the three spirits it represented, details were also varying that favoured, a different one of the three of them. It was around this time that when lifting the board from its, musty smelling heavy wooden case, that three slips of old burnt paper fell from underneath the board. Each piece of them had written on them a poem in Hebrew, which none of the members of the Mars Volta spoke or wrote in. And each poem was named the man, the mother, and the daughter. So they've got this. This is starting to get super weird for them around this.
So they had this worked out already. This is all this, and then they see this scraps of paper, and then this is confirming.
Yeah, exactly. So stuff's getting very weird, and they're starting to find very odd vibes. So that's when stuff starts going wrong. Soothsayer and the voice Goliath became more frustrated and more demanding with the band as the tour continued and their time became more limited. And one evening, 2 band members refused to do it anymore: Cedric Bixler-Zavala and the drummer, Blake Fleming. Later that week, just towards the end of the tour, Blake Fleming suddenly had to quit the band due to very sudden financial difficulties at home. He left the band and they were left drummerless right after the tour. The same week, Cedric developed a severe foot injury that had to be operated on and actually left him wheelchair bound for several months. And he had to learn to walk over a half-year process, half-year sort of time period afterwards. So at this point, it's starting to get a little bit weird. Omar especially is feeling a bit funny about everything that's going on. I've actually got a little quote from Omar around here. He said, I started getting nervous because it began asking for things in a threatening way. And Cedric was getting more and more into it. As someone who's overcome a drug addiction, I saw the obsessiveness and compulsion. To me, it was no different than when I decided to get clean. And when Jeremy Ward, a former bandmate, overdosed, who overdosed, was still on drugs. Omar continued, you could see it from a distance and be like, oh man, this isn't good. So for him, he sees this more as like he's seeing this as an organic, like real world. It's something that he's become obsessed with and he's leaning into. He's sort of, ignoring some of the other things. But anyway, so that's where they are now. They decide to go and record their next record. And they've decided to base it on the things that they saw on tour, how weird it all was. They decided to call it the Bedlam in Goliath. And everything's inspired by the Soothsayers and Goliath stories. So
a real quick question. When it's, I don't know if this information's out there or not, but when it's saying that it was getting demanding, like what kind of things was it asking them to do?
See, I was looking for some specifics because there have been a few things like there was a podcast with some interviews with Omar from like a few years ago, and I was sort of trying to read other bits and bobs to find specifics, and the closest I could find is they were asking for things from them. They were asking that Goliath was asking for them to promise it things, whether that be just their patience or a story about their childhood, things like that. There was give and take. Goliath was providing them with stories for information in return, was kind of the gist. I think it was active, being an active participant was what Goliath was looking for. Yeah. So they started recording. They're recording out in LA, and their jet takes down. A lot of their stuff they do live at this point as they're coming up with ideas. And they'd come back into the studio the next day to find completely empty hard drives. In fact, it happened so many times that Omar eventually gave up on making the album there and moved production to his New York home studio. On the first week that they began recording in New York, his studio flooded, which cost them a substantial amount of their equipment, as well as the bulk of the record. After taking some time off from that, they began recording again, and on the second week of recording, Omar's studio flooded for a second time. Whoa. They lost the record. It was around this time that their engineer had a nervous breakdown, and I have this quote from him saying, "I'm not going to help you make this record. You're trying to do something very bad with this record. You're trying to do something evil. You're trying to make me crazy, and you're trying to make people crazy." So, wow. Engineer steps out. Omar is getting very devoted to telling this story of Goliath. And at this point in time, the people around him are really starting to back out. It's starting to become a bit of a weird thing. But because it's at this point cost the band so much money, and it's costing sort of the mental well-being of everyone around them, Omar Rodriguez Lopez breaks Soothsayer in half. He snaps it in half in a fit of rage in the studio. And he reads about this. He reads about the idea. He's finding that Cedric is really going off the deep end at this point. And he reads about Ouija boards and how you undo, because he's gifted the Ouija boards to Cedric. It's said that the only way to sort of remove this curse is to take it from the person you've gifted it to and bury it in an undisclosed location and never let the person who owns that Ouija board know where it was. So that's what he does. So in an attempt to undo the curses, Rodriguez Lopez swore to never give away the location of the burial. And he also asked the band to not speak of it again for the remainder of the album's production. And in fact, the song Soothsayer on the album Bedlam and Goliath contains field recordings that Omar recorded in the location that Soothsayer is buried.
Really? That's what some of that is?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that's it. But yeah, so the album ultimately serves as an attempt to artistically reverse the perceived bad luck. And they do this by setting traps for the listeners to use it as a way to undo what the Soothsayer has brought upon the band. Yeah. The original version of that record, they did a limited edition version of the single on a record that was shaped like the eye of the Ouija board as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
But yeah, there's that's what occurred.
Wow. So what kind of things did they do to? So obviously, when they were starting the recording, they were putting things on there that were directly because of their experiences with the Ouija board with Soothsayer. Right. What did they do to undo it? What do you mean by like trap or trick the listener? So to undo curses, you have to tell stories in reverse. So they have the tales that were told of the mother, the daughter, and the man. They have those stories with the details told in reverse across the record. The idea is telling a story in reverse and spreading the information is what removes the curse. Letting people know, like sharing it. You share it to remove the curse. But there you go. That's
what are those sorts of stories that are recurring? As someone who hasn't listened to this record, except maybe incidentally, way back when. What are the kind of things that happen to the? So
it's very like if you listen to Cedric's lyrics around this time, nothing's very straight up. It's not like he's telling a story Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds style. There's not a start and an end. They're more like they're loosely themed around the emotional representation. So if it's from the perspective of the daughter, then the song is written from a point of infatuation. If it's from the mother, it's from a perspective of disappointment, and if it's from the man, it's greed and lust. And so it's those sort of very kind of general terms that they've sort of fed throughout the album.
So, and we don't have like the poems that that Goliath was saying through the Ouija board. Those haven't been made public.
No, I really searched for those, but I think they did just probably get buried with the rest of it. Like obviously, I love this story. The poems is the one bit where I'm like, well, that could be bullshit. But I love the whole thing, and I'm willing to sort of go full into this, But like that one, I was like, well, that one, that. So who knows? Who knows with the poems? The rest of it, I absolutely love though. I think it's a great tale.
Yeah, I was going to say, with one being like bullshit and 10 being, fact. Where do we sit around here, kind of for each of us in terms of how much we believe all this?
Wow. Well, okay. Well, okay. So like, I read a great article. I can't remember if it was in Rolling Stone about this occurrence. And they were saying, look, we'd all think this was absolutely, nonsense too, if it wasn't coming from some of the most honest, hardworking musicians in rock and roll. Like they're not here. They don't care about this. They don't care about marketing. This not what they're here for. So that's certainly, I do believe that's how they perceived the situation. Whatever the reality of it is, I do believe that's how they perceived it. I don't think this is a marketing exercise, for example.
Blake, what do you think?
I have a lot of feelings on it. So I could go a couple different ways with it. My very logical self says that this all happened to them and that their experiences are genuine, but they're also kind of loony and they're also on a lot of drugs. And so yes, I believe they were physically experiencing these things. I believe, he broke his foot. I believe all of that. I believe that he acquired the Ouija board, and I believe that they were messing with it. But do I believe that Goliath was a real thing that was reaching through and actually impacting things? Or is this a result of them being themselves? And when most of the things that occur to you in your life are a result of something that you did. Yeah. And so is this just one of those things? And then in their minds, it becomes something else. That's my logical side. My more spiritual side says you go looking for trouble like that, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
So maybe they did find something.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. Yeah, I like that idea. It's important to note that whilst I do think they absolutely think these are the things that occurred. The record label absolutely maximized on this. In fact, when the album came out, and they were obviously telling this story like, wow, man, this happened. It was really weird. The record label were like, brilliant. Oops. So when knocking my mic over, when they released the album, the record label also commissioned a game, a Ouija board computer game.
Of course they did.
That came out alongside it. And Omar's been very clear about being like, we had nothing to do with that. It was like, we didn't even okay it. We didn't see it. It was just a thing that came out. And because, of course, that came out around the same time, it totally delegitimized everything that they were saying. And it's only kind of in the years after where they've sort of carried on talking about it and been like, no, it's really, really weird time for them all. I think people have started to pay a little bit more attention to it.
For me,
how about you, Scott? How do you feel? Yeah,
it sounds a bit like the Mummy fan fiction in some ways. Like that he was in Jerusalem and went into an antique store and found the monkey's paw there. This all feels like a little trite, maybe. Yeah. So I don't know. It's difficult to believe as an outsider that all this happened, but I agree. It doesn't seem like all those guys are that wound up into wanting to have the interesting marketing behind it. It's just this thing that happened. What I would really want to ask more about from those guys is like the operational side of getting this information out of the board. Because I think it's pretty easy to imagine, like, we've all got our hands around the board and it's like, hey, who has a crush on Joe? And then we move it to, say, Alice or whatever. And that's like pretty easy. But getting to where you're like the richness, the depth here of like, oh, there are 3 different voices spelling out these poems, asking different things. That feels more than like one person kind of putting their finger on the scale might create. Right. But at the same time, there's a curious way that humans can have these emergent stories that come out of like a group of people in their like collective unconsciousness. So maybe there's a way that kind of occurred that way. I wish I could see like the poems and see what they were filling the blanks in and what like was the actual source material,
Yeah, exactly. I do. I think, in one hand, the idea of having this overall voice in Goliath that is representing 3 unique sub voices is so deep, so complex. On one hand, it sounds like like how could this be anything other than what it is? Because that's not what you do. If you're trying to make something up on a board, it's just something simple and random and scary. I'm coming for your head. Like it's not as complex as a love triangle in 1,000 years ago in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem. That side of things was incredible. But also the other side, I think, is if you look at a Ouija board having multiple voices, well, that actually just sounds a lot like what it is, which is multiple real world people trying to say things on a board.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing for me too. I feel that if you had somebody out there babbling nonsense, it would take like maybe a clinical psychologist speaking to them for a while to be like, okay, so what's happening is like they have this overall persona, call it Goliath, and then they're speaking through these sub personas at different times. That would take a lot. I think it would take a lot of back and forth to assess that that's kind of what's happening. That's the hierarchy of the ego inside of that person. Much less when you're moving one letter at a time through a Ouija board. That seems like that would take an eternity to get enough material out to make any sort of judgment on that. You know what I mean?
Sure. I do think one of the things, with a Ouija board, there are far less sentences being made than questions being asked and then answered using the side bits of a Ouija board have optional sort of answers, predictable answers. So I think a lot of these stories have been suggested, is this, were you in a love triangle? Yes. Like it's more likely to be that sort of elaborate stuff than detailed stories coming coherently from sort of what we don't know, 6-8 fellas potentially playing this game at any given time.
That's a good point.
You got 6-8 people who are interested enough to do it in the first place. So if you're interested enough to do it in the first place, there's some little tiny piece of you that wants something to happen.
Yeah.
And then if you get, even if like somebody's a true believer, somebody's a little bit skeptical, but they're still willing, if you're willing to play it all, there's a fraction of you that thinks that maybe something's going to happen, right? And then you get somebody who's a true believer, like really engaging with it and really believing. And then you have 6-8 dudes potentially on various substances, yes-anding each other for hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, that doesn't mean though that their experience wasn't a real experience. Sure. They still took it in and experienced it in that way. And they put it out into the world in the way they put it out because it came through their filter. So even if it wasn't a real spiritual experience, it was still a real experience for them. And it really occurred in the way that they said that it did. Whether the source was something called Goliath or not, or the source was them, that's up for debate to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious, do we know, was this Ouija board in English? Was it in Hebrew? Was it in ancient Aramaic? Because there's something about it, it's like I dug up this incredible ancient Native American tablet here, and look at it. It's incredible, and it's written in plain English.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I think they had they redrew or had an artist redraw an image of the Ouija board on the inside of the original pressing of the Bedlam in Goliath. So I wonder if I don't have an original pressing of that album. So
you will one day. I can see it in your eyes.
They are so much money now. I do have the box set. Do you know, like 2 years ago, the Mars Volta released every Mars Volta record on like one big box set. It was like £500, but it was a worthwhile spend. It was great, and it sits in a lovely display box. I own all those records already, but
as somebody who holds an original pressing of Thrice's Alchemy Index, the deluxe edition, you will receive no judgment from me, good sir.
I think I'm looking at what you're talking about, like an image of it, and it looks like it's backwards, which would kind of fit with what you've been talking about.
Yeah, but that one's just English. But
it's definitely in English, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Which
is a little interesting.
Yeah. That's
but I don't know because I haven't dug into the history of Ouija boards necessarily, but I don't think they're as old as maybe that story might suggest. Right. Just because it was old to them, it might have been an English board from like the 20s or the 30s. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Could have been. So yeah. Did it have Hasbro written on the side of it?
Yes. Kind of like the crystal ball that says Brunswick.
So I'm looking, and it says, one of the first mentions of the automatic writing used in the Ouija board is found in China around 1100 AD. That's maybe not like the traditional talking board, but there's some similar story of this. But yes, it does seem like this sort of modern Ouija board came from Maryland. from Baltimore,
Yeah.
of all places, like in about the late 19th century.
Wow.
I thought that was right. That's why I was saying like the 20s, I think, is when they started doing what we typically think of as the modern Ouija board. But again, that doesn't mean that. I think like when we're hearing the story, we're like, oh yeah, is this an ancient Aramaic or whatever? Is it a stone tablet? No, I think it was just a really old American Ouija board, which is still interesting.
Yeah, and does not like discredit anything in the sense that like if you do believe in these older spirits, you know, it doesn't mean that they can't speak through a modern Ouija board.
Exactly.
Well, automatic writing has been a thing for a really long time, ever since people have been writing. And for people who don't know what that is, it's basically somebody essentially goes into a trance and somebody else is moving the paper or whatever they're writing on for them, and their arms just kind of free moving. Probably the most, the clearest version I can think of was in The Changeling, that 1970s ghost movie. That's probably where most Americans at least got exposed to that for the first time, I'm guessing. It's kind of it's a creepy process to watch, even if you don't believe it's happening. It doesn't look it looks very unnatural.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I've not seen that.
So you're just kind of, you know, writing with your hand and then someone's like kind of dragging.
You're not really looking at it. You're just kind of it's usually a quote unquote medium. And they're just kind of moving their hand back and forth. And a lot of it doesn't do anything. Right. And then they'll ask a question like, were you killed in this house? And then the hand will kind of yes. And then they'll pull a table and they'll just be keeping scribbles for the most part. And like, was it your father? No. And then they'll pull another one. And so it's kind of it's very strange to see. Yeah. But I think there's always been versions of the Ouija board that weren't necessarily the traditional Ouija board that we're thinking of. You know, there's always been methods to communicate with the other side, and they all kind of involve the same sort of out of body experience to a degree. And Ouija board is just a more modern version of letting something else talk through you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also if you love that stuff, you're very willing to sort of make a few allowances here and there. You know, I'm incredibly boringly pragmatic and, you know, real world about everything. But I love just suspending common sense for stuff like this. I guess it comes down to, do you love horror movies and all that weird stuff? Then you're probably willing to suspend some logical beliefs for a weird story about, you know, like this. But
let me ask you guys this. Would you guys engage with a Ouija board or something like it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been trying to get my band to buy a Ouija board for years. But, you know, they're just on Amazon these days. And I'm like, no, I really do need to, like, go to Jerusalem or something and get one from there.
Yeah. No, you need to go to Baltimore.
Baltimore, get the original one. I don't know. I'm always a little bit sus about that. I don't believe in ghosts per se, but I don't believe that we know everything about everything either. And so I'm always a little bit sus about it. It fascinates me. I think that, like, it's interesting. The plausible deniability of the Ouija board seems to be what like enables a spirit to be able to come into it. That you would never know that for sure that it was the spirit.
It's the perfect mechanism for that, isn't it? Because it's impossible to actually disprove, as you know, as ridiculous as it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about you, Blake?
No, wouldn't touch it.
You wouldn't touch a Ouija board?
Nope, I would leave. Yeah. And it's not even because I mean, I love horror movies. I love all that stuff. I just don't think that I've ever heard of anything good coming out of it. I'm like, nothing that good ever occurs with this. Why bother? You know, like what am I going to get out of this? Oh, I got a question answered possibly by a ghost or possibly by Scott. So, you know, like and then the risk reward's not there at all for me. Like I get nothing out of it. I can still be entertained by the idea of it from afar. And the risk is I break my foot and die in a horrible car accident or, you know, get possessed and go crazy or something. Like that seems to be the way all of these stories end. I think if you would go ask the guys from the Mars Volta, and this is just me putting words in their mouth, hey, was that a lot of fun? they would probably tell you no. So yeah, I'm just going to be like, you guys have fun. I will see myself out for the evening.
You make a good point, Blake. You don't hear about like the Ouija board helping you pick the winning lottery numbers or something.
Never.
Yeah. So what's really in it for you?
I guess they made a great album. That's a good thing.
That's true.
But they really had to go through it to get there.
But
I'm curious.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, please. You.
I think they also, you have to bear in mind, they also had a high bar. Like at this point in time, they were very much into, it was a real throwing themselves into the world of prog, really wanting to have those deep, clever, complex stories that extend far beyond the music into, you know, everything else about the presentation of the record. They're following on from Francis the Mute, which is, you know, their most successful record. And do you guys know the story of Francis the Mute? Like, in a nutshell, I'll do it real quick because this is the story. This is the story that they came up with for this one. And I think, dear listener, if you know this, I might be getting this one wrong. I'm pretty sure they got this from a diary they found in the back of a taxi that was written in like a codex. So we're going into a sort of similar, that tells this story of a character called Vismund Cygnus, who is, he has a troubled past and he's embarking on a journey to understand his origins. He's looking to find out more about his mother, who was a prostitute, and he, in fact, is only born through a failed abortion. She became pregnant from a clergyman, and it's the whole thing is about the people he talks to as he tries to piece together his own past. And, you know, it's all about family, identity, trauma, all those things in one, all written in this weird sort of coded way. So they've already started like a dark, like super dark, weird, you know, sort of slightly occult like storytelling in the previous record. This is very much a continuation of that. So I think it helps to understand that it's not like they went from, I don't know, writing pop songs about their favorite sports cars to Francis the Mute. You know, it feels like they'd have ended up there even without the Ouija board.
So I've ridden in a fair few Ubers and taxis in my life, and I have yet to find a coded diary of a person explaining conveniently the whole context of them and their life and how they came to be and what they were doing. That's wild. I'm gonna adjust my bullshit meter down to like a 2.5 now that there's like a whole other thing of like, oh, and then after that we found this haunted Ouija board. This seems unlikely. If it was one of them on their own, I think I'd believe it more.
Yeah. You know what? My meter's going down a little bit as well with the context of that. It was pretty high. Mine was probably at like a 7.5, 8.
I tried to really give you that story there, but
No, it was amazing. It's such a good story.
See, here's the thing about it, though. I don't really care. I kind of love the story, so it doesn't matter if it's a real story or not. I mean, it's cooler as a listener if it is a real story, but I like horror movies, and none of those are real. It doesn't make me enjoy them any less. So, I mean, it's still a great story, and it's very interesting and adds something, because now when I go back and listen to it, even though I was just listening to it yesterday and prep for this, I'm going to be a lot more like detail oriented with it and go like, oh, that's the backwards part. Okay. Interesting. Like I'm going to be more closely listening. So in that case, the story, I think, achieved its probably desired effect, made me more interested in the record I already liked.
There you go. That's I'm glad that it did. But yeah, there are lots of stuff that go into more detail about this potentially than I did. Not like I hit just about everything on the Bedlam and Goliath story. But if you want to learn about the lead up to it, the Francis the Mute stuff and how it went into that, there are some great, like progarchives.com has a bunch of forum posts where people have really pulled apart how those two albums flowed into each other. So there's lots of stuff on it. If you're bored, dear listener, and you want to actually learn the subtle minutiae of a band of who, of course, Francis and Mute was full heroin addiction time for the Mars Volta. They were at their most creative, but they were also, and all of them, absolute wrecks. It's interesting reading about them at that time.
For sure.
I have an epilogue sort of question for you, Joe. Did the curse and the Ouija board and all that, did this ever resurface again in later Mars Volta years, or was it basically like we buried it, we put out the album, the record label put out a video game, and we never really heard about it again? Everything was fine thereafter.
Well, actually, it depends how you want to read into it, because I guess, you know, if either of you seen like the Mars Volta documentary at all, things might get weird. So, I mean, that is a great example of what happens afterwards, because Cedric, more than any of the others, has a real addictive personality and tends to grab hold of things. It was shortly after this point in time, the Bedlam and Goliath point in time, that he discovered Scientology. I mean, he didn't discover it; it was always already there. But, you know, he became a part of it. And it's when he leaves the Scientologist church and they start, they like murder his dog and leave it on his doorstep and do a bunch of other stuff to him. The documentary focuses on him being stalked by people from the Scientologist church after he left, and it's his life got very dark around that time. So whether or not he freed himself from the curse, there you go.
That's interesting. I do want to watch that now more than I did before. I already kind of wanted to watch it. So
there you go.
Interesting stuff.
You see, like the Mars Volta are basically always going to be wrapped up in curses and occult stuff. I think that's the backbone of it.
Yeah. So, which just gives me a more strong stance, and I'm not going to play with the Ouija board. I don't want to be cursed. I like my curse-free life currently. It's kind of nice. Yeah. I get to hang out with you guys. Imagine if I was cursed, what it would be like.
You're not allowed to hang out with people when you're cursed.
Would you want to hang out with a cursed person?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Would we be able to see you? Do you still have a reflection when you're cursed?
I don't know. I've never been cursed as far as I know.
You can't operate the hand-activated paper towel dispensers either. It's terrible.
It's a nightmare. Just wet hands. You've always got wet hands
Constantly
when you're
wet. Yeah. Shaking people's hands. They're just like, what is wrong with you? Like, no, I just washed my hands. I promise. That's all it was. No other reason.
That is a curse itself, being wet and unable to dry oneself off permanently.
Yeah. That's the curse you can bring upon your enemies, Scott. Eternally moist.
Just so
Sounds
wet.
like a D&D move, the curse of eternal moisture.
Wow.
Well, guys, I really enjoyed that. Joe, thank you for bringing that to us. Do we have any closing thoughts we want to wrap this up with?
Me?
Anyone?
Oh,
all of us. Oh. Yeah, I do. I have one, but I'm saving it.
Okay. Well, mine is, listen to more Omar Rodriguez Lopez, people. It's really weird. Listen to one of his albums, Woman Gives Birth to Tomato. It's basically, I think he had every musician record in a different room at different times, and he only gave them the key and the BPM. So it's a weird listen.
Wow. All right.
That is indeed wild. I'm a Captain Beefheart fan, but at least they were like aware loosely of what was happening. That sounds like that'd be crazy. I am actually more than a lot of stuff that we even do here. I'm excited to jump back into the Mars Volta and check it out, especially some of the weirder stuff. Like I said, I fell off a little bit before it got even weirder. It was weird to begin with.
There's a sweet spot between like 2006 and 2009, or maybe as late as 2013, where just all the solo stuff, all of the sub bands, everything they did was just gold for me. Mm-hmm. So I would say focus on that, because Omar produces and releases everything he has, and is obviously, it's well documented. He's an incredibly arrogant man. He has no filter. He just puts out every single thing he's ever released. And so there's an awful lot. You've got to get through it to find the good stuff, But the good stuff is the best stuff.
Nice. Well, I just want to close off by saying, go check out Guitar Nerds. But Joe left out, I thought maybe you'd get into it, but you left out a crucial piece, in my opinion, of the Joe Branton puzzle, which is he has his own ridiculously good band called Polymath. And he plays bass in it, and he's up there just being a sexy monster. And it's a very good band. If you like the Mars Volta, a good chance you're going to find some Polymath stuff you like too.
Oh, can I tell you a little Polymath thing? It'll be very quick. It won't be too self-indulgent, I promise. We're just about to put out an EP called The Halting Problem. Well, in November, we've announced a few shows for that. And then we just got signed by a US label. And so we've had to bench an album until April. But we're putting out an album in April called Something Deeply Hidden, which is inspired by a book of the same name, which is all about, quantum physics. And when we release Something Deeply Hidden so only you will know this, dear listener, because I'm not advertising this. When we release it on record, on 12-inch record, the disc label on the middle of the vinyl will have a QR code, and if you scan that QR code, it will take you to another record called More Deeply Hidden Still, which we are never releasing. We're only putting it out as the QR code. So it won't be on Spotify. It will just be for people that buy the record. And it's a full hour-long additional album. That's how broad we are.
Yeah, I like that.
You
That's
are.
good.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
There you go.
Good stuff. Well, I'm glad I brought that up so you could give that a little plug.
Thanks.
Scan that QR code when it comes out, people.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to. It's going to be good. Yeah. All right. Is that good? We good to wrap, you think?
Do it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for checking out another episode of Tape Spaghetti. Thank you to Joe Branton for showing up at a late hour over there in the UK to bring us this story. And thank you all for all the support on this show. It's gone way better than I could have expected. And if you could continue to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff on whatever platform you're listening to this on, that would be much appreciated. And we're going to get weird next week, wherever you're checking this out on. And please come join us. So we'll talk to you all on the internet very soon. Bye-bye.
Farewell.